Hey guys, Elizabeth Quinn here again with Elizabeth Scenes and Scents, and welcome back to my channel. Please don't forget to check out my website, which is waftingwonderfulwax.scentsy.us, where I'm Liz Quinn, your certified Scentsy consultant. So, if you have been with me with my channel for a while, way back in February, I did my very first what I would call a literary melting basket, and today I am back for the second one for the year. Probably a couple of years until I can't figure out which classic book we have left to cover. And today I have my very favorite children's classic chapter book, and that is Little House in the Big Woods. I love the entire Little House on the Prairie series. I have read them all many, many times. Laura Ingalls Wilder is one of my absolute favorite authors for the way that she transports you with her words into her experiences. But today we're going to have some fun covering the very first book that my mother read to me, kind of to make me feel all grown up, as a chapter book, and that is Little House in the Big Woods. So I really wanted to set the scene. I hope you guys enjoyed the background today. And I dug out some classic china, and I have this wonderful tea that's really fancy that we'll talk about, I think, in my next video, which will be what I've been warming. And we're just going to have a good old time. So when you think of Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, these happy golden years, all the different books that Laura wrote about herself, the first and most important character is Laura. And I really racked my brain about what should I choose for Laura. So I went through all my bars, and I came up with a bar that is sassy, it's assertive, you like it better after you've gotten to know it for a while, and it's extremely honest, and that would be Buckleberry. I think that Laura's buoyant personality and just that little bit of tartness that she's got really, really goes with this bar of Buckleberry, and she is just the most wonderful author as far as perspective. I love the way in which she brings you into the books. So for Little House in the Big Woods, that is when she is quite young. It's the first book, and when I was a child and my mother would read that to me, it would just draw me into this other world, this place with, you know, gigantic towering trees and scary panthers and bears that were tree stumps and the coziness factor. And that is really what I wanted to explore in my melting basket, is the coziness of that book, which I feel like the others, as they go across the prairie and then as she grows up, that they don't quite capture that. So this one is really, really amazing for me. So first off, we have Laura herself as Buckleberry. And then who is the other most important character in the majority of her books? I believe it would be Pa. And I actually, months ago, started planning this particular melting basket, and I had to ask my director if she had one of these bars. I believe the best scent for Pa is Hemingway. Hemingway, even just as a literary figure himself, is larger than life, and Pa definitely is too. Pa Ingalls with his long brown beard and his fiddle playing and his snappy, sparkly blue eyes. And there was a steadiness about him, even though he was quite the one to take a gamble and take chances. But his personality always anchored Laura in her stories. And this particular bar is woody. It's got a little bit of a cologne aspect. It has a lot of warmth from apples. And it is just the most gorgeous and very comforting masculine scent. So I really thought that that would honor Pa very much. Now next we have her Ma. And Ma, whose name is Caroline, was from the East, and she was very sophisticated, especially for the backwoods where she ended up with her husband and all these people that I don't know where they met, I never did learn that, but she really brought all of those feminine graces into their little log cabin. So the beautiful Bring Back My Bar from a long time ago that was in clearance recently, Silhouette, this is very subtle, sophisticated, and understated. And every time that Laura would talk about her Ma, she would talk about how beautiful she was. She would talk about how elegant she was. She would talk about how their little cabin just had this sense of beauty, even though they were out in the middle of the woods. And so this bar really, really does that for me. I love melting this. It brings such a sense of elegance and serenity to the home, and that is who I believe Caroline Ingalls was. And then there is her big sister, Mary, and Mary was always the perfect one. Laura's hair was brown, and in all the books as she's growing up, she complains about how Mary would get all the attention, and her brown curls were ugly, and Mary's golden curls were beautiful. I don't care what color hair you have, but Mary was always the pretty one, always the perfect one. Unfortunately, later on in her life, she really did go blind. I believe it was from scarlet fever. But the beauty of Mary and just sort of that perfection and untouchability that Laura comments about all the time. I think Blue Hyacinth is a beautiful bar for her because everything about her is just ethereal and perfect and good, at least to her little sister, Laura. So Blue Hyacinth is just one note, beautiful, very elegant, and very attention-getting floral. And wherever Mary would go, even later in her life after she went to be at the College of the Blind, people spoke so well of her. All right, so those are the basic characters, and there are other sisters and all that come later, but that's who is present in Little House in the Big Woods. So how about the setting? How about all the things that Laura was experiencing? And as I was rereading the book the other day, I found lots about fire, I found lots about smoke, I found lots about apples and cloves and spices and huge spreads of pioneer food, and it was just the most wonderful book to reread. So first off, I have Cozy Cabin, and Cozy Cabin is an old one from our Cozy collection that was around Christmas time one year. I really think Scentsy should bring back this whole collection at some point. This winter, we're going to be getting a bring back, like a throwback whole Christmas Classics Warmer collection. You guys are going to love it. But this Cozy Cabin, this one's got bayberry, it's got musk. It definitely gives you that nice cuddly woodsy feel, and I think it's a wonderful, appropriate setting-specific bar for Little House in the Big Woods. All right, the next one, since fire is present everywhere, they have to smoke their meat, they have to keep the wood stove going all the time, they go to Grandpa's and they boil all the sap down so they can have a sugaring off party, a big dance. This Around the Campfire has that sap note, it has the smoke note, and it's got the wood note. I think this is probably the best for the all-encompassing feeling of reading that book, Little House in the Big Woods. Oh, it's so good. And this one's great for fall. It's in our current catalog. Now, there are many, many times where Laura and her family are gathered around the fireside. So I've got several hearth and home bars here, one of which was from last year, Fireside Chats. Now, they also do a lot, because they are pioneers of meat smoking. And this one, of all the bars that are in here, has almost a little bit of a savory note. So I guess you could say this is probably what it smelled like outside when they were smoking their venison or their ham or whatever they needed to be able to get through a long winter. Fireside Chats is very nice. It's definitely one of the more rugged bars in this box. Okay, next we have Toasted Acorn and Oak, and so much of what Laura explored as a little girl was out in the woods, and the big woods of Wisconsin, as she paints the picture, is thick with trees. There are so many trees that I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but there's one experience in the book later where there aren't any trees, and she actually feels small and afraid because as a child, she did not know what it was like to be out in the open. But anyway, back to our Toasted Acorn and Oak here. This smells very much like a toasty cabin to me. I have gone to a lot of historical sites and had a lot of fun just really enjoying old log cabins and old homes, and this definitely feels like it could be Laura's little log house cabin snug scent. The Toasted Acorn and Oak and all of the old oak trees, and when the acorns drop on the ground in the fall, all of that is in that bar. All right, next, okay, my very favorite bar of all time that Scentsy's ever made is Cozy Fireside, and the stories that Pa would tell, especially on the winter evenings. Laura and Mary loved them, and he would play his fiddle. And this, especially around Christmas, because Ma had a clove-studded apple that was given to her by another aunt. That must have been all the rage. I think it was the 1880s, correct me if I'm wrong, but it was after the Civil War. And a clove-studded apple, which I still make, you call them pomanders today, smells like that by the sewing basket next to the fireside with Cozy Fireside. And oh my goodness, this bar is worthy of that book. Just spicy fireside comfort, hearth and home goodness. All right, the next one is Autumn Hearth, and this one is currently available. So this beautiful bar is more like in the fall when they would be out picking apples and they would be digging in the garden and bringing things in and then making different things that you would jar or you would eventually freeze, because in old-fashioned times like that, they had to make certain things on certain dates, certain times of the year, because they couldn't just go throw it in the freezer like we have. They would have to literally know that it was going to freeze and stay a hard frozen type of weather so that they could keep certain things that they prepared all through the wintertime. So here we have this wonderful autumn hearth, which just makes me think of apple or pumpkin pie baking. and that smoky hearth, and they had a dog named Jack, the brindle bulldog, who would lay down. And in this book, they still had a cat named Susan, a beautiful black cat that Laura loved. All right, so then another one is our apple and cinnamon sticks, and this reminds me of Ma's clove-studded apple. And this has some white pumpkin and some oak, so it also reminds me of the storage area Laura describes beautifully in this book, which is probably my favorite single page. I don't believe with copyright issues that I can show you the book, but there is a page of Garth Williams' illustrations where the two girls are sitting on pumpkins, and they're under the rafters in that storage area upstairs in their little cabin in the big woods. And there are onions and peppers and other dried things and herbs hanging from the rafters. The girls have their dolls, and that scent is what I think that apple and cinnamon sticks bar and a couple others I'm going to show you just evokes. It's my favorite picture, favorite page, favorite moment out of all the Little House books. All right, next we have Maple Apple Bourbon, which kind of also reminds me of Laura's personality because she's kind of sassy like this. Oh, this is such a great bar. But maple is present in so many of these different chapters in this book because they're in the middle of the woods where in the springtime there would be a sugar snow. There was a whole chapter on this, and then they had this huge dance where all of the women put all their hair up, and it was actually the fashion back then to hide your ears behind swoops of hair. I don't have enough hair to do that, but I really tried here with my favorite prairie dress and everything to kind of evoke the mood. So they had this sugaring off dance, and they had apple pies and pumpkin pies, and Grandma outjigged her son on the dance floor. It was quite a good moment in the book. But the maple apple bourbon reminds me of when she's pouring the sugar into the patty pans for the children, and then it'll harden, and they had their favorite treat, and they had the apple pies and all these different things that were going on. So this is just a good, spicy, frolicking good time kind of a scent, and it reminds me of that party. Oh, so good. So then, just baking is very present, especially in this first book because they're settled in the big woods and they have a good supply chain compared to later when they're out on the prairie and everything is who knows what. So their baked apple pie, I definitely got the feeling that Ma baked consistently and regularly with everything that came down the pike. There's even one way farther into the series where she fools Pa, they're having hard times, by making a green tomato pie taste like an apple pie. It was one of the sweetest moments that I remember in all of the books, so this kind of honors that too. All right, then Laura and Mary each have an oak tree out in the front yard where they have their playhouses, and they sit on stumps and they use little acorns and leaves, and they have their little rag dolls. Laura's doll was named Charlotte, and Falling Apples reminds me of that part of the story very much because it has the apple, it's got the oak, it's got the outdoor air, and this one's brand new this year. And if you haven't tried it yet, we're a couple days into the new catalog. If you love apple and you love woodsy, please get this bar. All right, next we have Autumn Road Trip, and Pa does a lot of hunting in the fall out in the woods, and this one, and I think I have painted leaves in here, these two really go with that setting, and he would be out there for hours looking for food for his family. And just this whole pioneer work ethic really encouraged me that working hard is very important, and it's something that in our day and age we need to continue to treasure to do. So Autumn Road Trip is a good one for that. Okay, then here's Painted Leaves. I knew it was in here. So then they do a lot of traveling to different relatives' homes, and in your old bobsled with your big pair of draft horses, you're not going real fast. So maybe around Thanksgiving or Christmas, Painted Leaves really reminds me of that cold air where you start to get the first snows, and sometimes those trees, especially the oak trees, they just hold on to their leaves and hold on to their leaves. And this is sort of that late October into November, even early December, depending on the year, kind of super fresh, crisp smell in the air. Okay, now back to that moment in the attic where, as I was very carefully reading the pages of that book yesterday, I think it was, or the day before, she said that she could smell the spices, she could smell the pumpkins, she could smell, basically in her words, all of the good things for fall tucked up under the eaves, making the little house happy. And so Amber Hollow reminds me of all of those different spices because there would be medicine spices up there hanging from the eaves. You know, different herbs and plants and roots, and this just smells very much like a Pioneer storehouse. And then the other one to go with it that has more of the apples and the pumpkin and the squash is Harvest Blessings. Oh, this is such a good bar. This just smells like Pioneer Hoedown to me. It is gorgeous. This one is fantastic, especially for the Thanksgiving time. It is just cuddly and rich and wonderful. All right, we've got a couple left. I have the Orchard Apple and Spice because they also have a cherry tree in their backyard where Ma would do the cheese making. And I guess she would use the shade of that, and then they would put down the cheese board, and then you make all that labor intensively. And Laura did a beautiful job describing the entire process, how they had to go out, and you literally had to ask your relatives who had the calf so that they could have the rennet, so that they could milk the cow, so that, you know, all the things that go into it. If you're a cheesemaker, an artisan cheesemaker today, let me know how the process goes now. But anyway, back to the cherry tree. This Apple Orchard and Spice has apples. It's got cherries. It's got that wonderful woodsiness. And it's so good. So that really captured that particular moment in the story. Doesn't smell like cheese, I promise. And then last but not least, there was a moment in Little House in the Big Woods that I had forgotten until I reread the book. For the first time where Laura had ever seen really water, any kind of a lake or anything, they went to the town of Pepin, I'm pretty sure that's what it was called, where they traded. That's where Pa would go with his furs and everything. That was the trading post where they could get all their supplies. And Laura beautifully describes how little she felt and how glad she was that she was in the wagon with her Ma and her Pa when she saw a wide open sky for the first time and saw a huge body of water, which I believe was Lake Pepin. So then after they went into the general store, and of course Mary got compliments on her pretty golden hair and Laura didn't on her brown hair. It's so funny what we think of when we're little children, and sometimes we carry that all of our life. Afterwards, they went out and they explored the lake for the first time. She got a huge sack of pebbles, put them all in her pocket, which was in her dress, and then the pocket ripped out of her dress because she had so many pebbles and she was all sad, but she did get to take the pebbles home. And on my own, I have collected rocks and driftwood and things along Lake Michigan for years, and it really kind of reminded me of sweet childhood memories for myself. So Sandswept is about the only bar I could think of that has that rock note, and it's got that beautiful water. So each of us has certain memories in our life that when we retell them to others, it just brings them vividly back to life. And I think that's one of the reasons that the Little House books endure in just their belovedness. Laura Ingalls Wilder is a fantastic author who painted a picture, brought you into the moods. And honestly, as I was rereading it, I realized she would draw attention to all of the details of hearth and home. And that may honestly have influenced my love of scent all of my life long, because when we read things and we reread them over and over again, they really do get inside of us and they help form our perspective on life. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this. Many of these bars are available right now, and you can create your own cozy little house in the big woods with Scentsy. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.